Thank you for joining our session today. My name is John Metzelaar. I am working with the conference board. I'm leading their innovation and digital transformation practice, or institute as we call it. And that includes running two peer-to-peer networks around innovation leadership in Asia and in Europe. And I work closely with, maybe some people know her even, with Rita Shore in the US, who's my partner in crime for the conference board on the US side of our business. And we're here to partner with Hype Innovation and really take you through a new development, which I'm sure you're interested in. This is why you're in this call. And that is the new ISO standard 56000. And of course, if you can go mute, that'd be nice, folks. Thank you, Jesse. The new ISO norm and standard that is setting us up to supposedly do innovation management better. And so I must say, the first time that I heard of this, having lived innovation at Procter & Gamble for 30 years, I got a hit of shivers in terms of how much more standardization and maybe even bureaucracy do we need to add to our innovation game. But as I got into it, I learned more, and I warmed up to the idea, which made me want to host this session with us. I'm not going to be here alone, frankly. I'm a bit of a novice in this area, and so I'm sure I'm going to learn as well. And I am joined here by what is a beautiful combination of an expert and a practitioner. And so let me go and introduce those two to you, starting with, maybe illogically, but you'll see the flow as we get through it. The practitioner, and that's Thanos Yiagopoulos, and so he is. He's going to introduce himself. CTO of Momentive, very interesting, excellent, successful company, and he's going to go and be surprised in this session as Colin Nelson, who is the expert from Hype Innovation, is going to share with him the results of the innovation management assessment, innovation maturity, I would almost call it, assessment. And that's really what I've learned is one of the attraction of this standard. It's really not so much to go and straitjacket you in a certain way of you need to do this to go and do innovation properly, but it is about stepping back and look at your innovation management practices and your portfolio even, and see where are strengths that I can leverage and where are outages, opportunities that I can build and fill. And so that's what we're going to learn today. Should be a very interactive session. And with that, I will start to ask Thanos to introduce himself. Thanos.
Thank you, John, and thank you for hosting us today. Thank you for inviting me to the session. As John mentioned, I'm Thanos Yiagopoulos. I actually run the global technology organization as Momentive's CTO. I'll start a little bit giving an overview of what Momentive is, because probably a company that's not well known out there. Momentive is a specialty chemical company. It's a pure play silicons manufacturer. We manufacture silicon formulated products and additives for a variety of markets. We're a $2.5 billion company spread across the world. Practically, we are at 40 locations, 20 countries. We're a decentralized organization. We don't have a central position in the world. We're pretty well spread. We have almost a 4,000 customer base in 100 countries, and our commitment is really understanding megatrends, markets, developing very specialty chemistries for applications to really drive a sustainable world and enrich human lives. And I think this is our strength, is product development and product leadership. That's the reason part of what we're going to be talking about today is in this context. Regarding myself, my role is to lead the global technology organization, which consists of about 500 employees around the world at 10 decentralized R&D sites. So part of the discussion will be how the standard can help us actually come together. And within that framework, I run the global value chain of innovation from end to end, from application, product development, the corporate R&D, process technology, IP, strategic marketing, and also business process COE for technology and R&D processes. So I have a special interest to the standard because it covers all these elements. And I agree with John. The first time I got exposed to it through John and the conference board, I was very skeptical because the last thing we need here is more bureaucracy in innovation and technology. However, as I got into this, I realized this can present a very interesting framework at my level, even higher level, to really assess the maturity and the readiness of your organization and you're able to communicate both the strengths and opportunities for improvement at a level that becomes more tangible, where people are not really engaged to the details, but can also drive resources and drive alignment and allocation of how can you improve overall. It's also a good benchmark to really compare and contrast with other companies, which is something I'm very interested in. So I got into it, and with the experts from Hype, we did an assessment, and that is what we're going to talk about today. So thank you, John, for bringing us together.
Yeah, this is a nice opportunity to move it over to Colin Nelson from Hype Innovation, who is an expert who has been deeply into this matter for several years already. And hopefully he can confirm the bias that we have been developing and say how useful this tool could be for us. So maybe Colin, introduce yourself and ground us into the specifics of the tool before we get into the practices with Thanos. You're mute.
Thank you very much for the reminder. Yeah, good to be with you. Thanks for the introduction. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Colin Nelson. I'm Chief Innovation Consultant at Hype Innovation, which basically means I spend most of my time talking to organizations about innovation performance and helping guide them. And I've been doing some variant of this activity for over 20 years. And before that, I was a corporate innovator myself. So I was living and breathing the work of innovation and wrestling with leadership and culture and communications and all of the things that we often talk about and are embedded in the standard. And I think I was of similar mind when I first encountered the ISO 56000 set of standards. We've had 56002 since 2019. This was the guidance standard. And I read through it and I thought, yeah, it makes sense. Everything there is there that I expect. It's constructed within an ISO way, which is from a language perspective isn't always as comfortable as we might like as innovators, but it made sense to me. But I didn't really see organizations taking different actions around it. But in 2024, back in September, we finally had the standard against which we can be accredited. That's 56001, and this has been an interesting time as the standard has sort of percolated a little bit, and we've explored it with clients. I think the perspective has changed. And what we realize now is this is a systems approach, it is an umbrella, almost a structure of building blocks that organizations are advised to pursue, but it doesn't standardize innovation. It just gives you a really good structure. The way I tend to think about it is it's a management standard within which innovation can thrive. There are some gaps deliberately that will always rest on the shoulders of corporate innovators, and I'll talk about those in a second. What I'd like to do is just give people some sense of how the industry as a whole is reacting to having a standard, because we haven't had one, and there have been some folks out there have been pursuing this for 20 years. Some organizations, they see it as an opportunity to differentiate themselves. And at some point in time, they would like to be accredited. And I'm seeing the biggest trend for that in places like the Middle East and business services companies, organizations that are competing for business today as well as tomorrow. And they want to be able to show the fact that they have innovation baked into their DNA, and they're a great selection as a partner. But there's a larger group of organizations that say, yeah, accreditation is interesting, but maybe not for now. We've got an awful lot of work to do, and we want to improve innovation performance. And we'll use the standard as our North Star. We'll use it as our guidance as to what we're building towards. And the credibility of ISO is significant. So when they're talking to leaders and executives, they can explain why they're putting these sort of building blocks in place. But as I said earlier, it does have some gaps. And this is pretty much where I come in and my work and my colleagues' work, which is that the framework gives us that umbrella, that structure, that set of building blocks. But what it doesn't do is take into account the starting point of an organization, how much pressure it's under to change, the culture of that organization, its structure, whether we're hierarchical or very flat, its commercial and innovation objectives. And so there is a big gap for us as an industry to think about what does that roadmap look like to help improve innovation performance, heading towards that North Star, building a culture and more belief in the process over time. And so that has been quite exciting for our industry. My initial skepticism is gone, and I'm seeing consistently this, whether it's a North Star type conversation or accreditation type conversation, organizations embracing it at various different magnitude. So that leads us on to this innovation management assessment and our topic for today. We felt that it'd be helpful for organizations to have some kind of starting point, something quick and easy just to get a sense of how am I doing and what does the standard include? So we created an innovation management assessment, which is available online. And I'm just going to share my screen for a second so you can see what that looks like. Hopefully everybody will be able to see this in just one second. You can go on our website if you like. I'll show you the link in a moment. But the innovation management assessment essentially is an automated assessment, and it's there to give you a sense of what's in there and how are you doing. And this is exactly the process that Thanos has been through. It's free, it's available online, and it takes about 15, 20 minutes. And it produces out the back of that a summary report, which gives you some sense of, okay, where are we doing well and where are the sort of major areas to act. It's not a full gap analysis. For those of you familiar with ISO language will be familiar with the concept of a gap analysis, but it will give you a sense of how you're doing it from a sort of building block perspective. And we also add a little bit of a veneer, our consultant view on top of that to say, based on what we're reading and what we can see in your industry, these are other things you might want to think about. If you do want to have a go at taking the assessment, you can follow this QR code or follow that link there. It's just hyperinnovation.com/innovation management assessment. And I would say it's probably more designed for medium to large enterprises rather than very small companies. So just bear that in mind when you're doing it. It's the standard is something that is quite significant in terms of magnitude, and it is designed for companies of all types and shapes, but it very much lends itself, I think, to the medium to large organizations and enterprises. So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to take Thanos through some of his results, and we're going to deep dive into some of those areas of interest where I think are either some really good examples of best practices or some interesting conversations to have.
And so the more I hear you talk, and again, we had a session as well for the Asian audience this morning already, and so I'm more and more percolating in my own little brain. The Commerce Board runs our flagship product is the C-Suite Outlook, which we publish every year. We do the research late November. We publish first week in Jan, and it interviews 1,500 or so C-Suite executives from all around the world, including like 800 CEOs. And you know what? The number one priority of CEOs for this year, despite all the trade and all the other things that are servicing the geopolitical, challenges, is how do I create a more innovative organization? And so how do I drive more innovation output, as you called it, Colin? And so, but then when you look at how satisfied they are with the results, it's not very
Pretty
high.
low. Yeah, it's bad.
It's
Yeah.
very high, but the result.
Yeah.
So the fact that 33 of you, or 33, I guess 30, 33 minus 3 are online, shows that I think you're doing the right thing to go and see what can I do better, and how can I better meet the needs of the business / the leadership.
Yeah. And maybe just to build on that for a second, John, I think that many of the executives, when you speak to them that are not corporate innovators, you find that when they did their MBA classes, innovation wasn't part of the syllabus. They didn't study innovation. They understand sales and marketing and manufacturing and production, but the level of innovation DNA that exists at the very top levels of organization is actually quite low. And I don't think that teaching around innovation has improved dramatically until relatively recently. And so it's a battle for an organization, a chief innovation officer, to explain to leadership, what are we working on? What should you invest your time and energy on? And I think that the standard gives us some routes forward through that, I hope.
Well, and then thank you we didn't set this up, folks, but thanks for lifting me up personally, because I just finished a couple of weeks ago, I finished my executive MBA class or course, which I call Leading and Living Innovation. So at least the Solvay Brussels School, where I teach, has got a full-fledged innovation program included in the executive MBA. And indeed, in today's world, it's hard to imagine how you cannot have an MBA without it. So anyway, I think everybody's now going like, yeah, so show me what you have, folks, and get tangible, please. And that is indeed what the majority of this session is going to be about. So why don't you start and lift the veil for Thanos in terms of the first, I think there's 7 different metrics, right, that you use fundamentally. And so let's start with one of them at least. Oh, you're going to show the overview first.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this is the overview. This is part of the outputs that come from the innovation management assessment. You'll see a little radar chart on the left-hand side and a bar chart on the right. The headings that you see, those 7 headings tie direct, there's ISO language. I'll explain what that means within innovation context as we go through. But what we're going to do is we're going to pick out 5 of these big themes, and we're going to talk about how Momentive is performing and also dig in with a couple of questions around those. But what you can see as a result of this is actually the performance for Momentive is very, very good, very strong. In fact, of all the organizations we've had go through the innovation management assessment, Momentive comes out top, which is fantastic. It gives us a chance to dig into what Thanos is doing and learn some good practices that we can all learn from. Of course, every organization is a little different, and what transpires works in one place doesn't necessarily work in another. But I hope we should be able to see sufficient inspiration here, irrespective of what sector industry you're in, to be able to take some great content from. So as I mentioned, on the right-hand side, I've just highlighted in orange those areas where we are going to focus on, and we're going to kick off with the context of the organization. And for everyone's benefit, we're just sharing the questions that are included in the innovation management assessment alongside the conversation. So if you're wondering about what kind of things are included, you can take a read of that. But just to kind of shortcut that process, context of the organization, it's the ISO language, means innovation strategy to the rest of us. And this section really includes things that we must consider, for example, both internal and external signals. So how are we structured? What's our culture like? What sort of resources do we have available? But also, what are we listening to in terms of market trends and new technologies and regulations, and helping set and manage stakeholder expectations to make sure that we define the scope of an innovation management system which brings all of that stuff together. And then as an organization, we're required to establish and implement and maintain and then continually improve those processes to make sure that we've got everything covered. And that's really what we talk about. We talk about context of an organization. So within Momentive's perspective, you can see here that they're doing really well. The answers here are agree or strongly agree. So what I want to dig into specifically is about the external signal piece, because that's an area that I think a lot of organizations struggle with. Being able to listen to customers and trends and emerging technologies, and maybe something that an employee picked up at a conference. Understanding that, processing that, and helping feed that into strategy is important. Maybe Thanos, you can give us some insights in terms of how you do that at Momentive, and what good practice looks like within your organization around processing those signals.
Yes, thank you, Colin. And that's, I think, an ever-evolving space, external signals, and to when ideas come from and what actually was the focus. But before we go that, let me explain a little bit how we operate our innovation, trend-driven innovation model in Momentive. We're focused on vertical markets that we have strength, and we would like to attain number one, number two position, like personal care, agriculture, electronic materials, aerospace, aviation, healthcare. And those are markets that we'll take deep dives into. What that means specifically is that we go and try to understand what are the mega trends influencing these markets in the next 5 years. And that is a structural assessment that happens at that market level. And that is actually an assessment that consists of two things. One, we get feedback from our customers. We're very close to our customers as we provide them technical support, innovation, extended channel support, and so on. And we get that VOC, that voice of the customer, to understand what's changing, what will this allow for, and what it means for us. However, we don't contain ourselves to it. We also get external independent content that actually analyzes those markets and compares the two. And that's a structured process that we follow. We have a strategic marketing organization where at least we've actually looking at an independent view of those markets. And we try to triangulate what we're hearing from our customers and what potential more futuristic view of the market could be in the next 5 years. Through this analysis, we identify areas for us to focus, which are mostly areas of new emerging applications. For example, the healthcare segment is changing through the traditional spaces where we've been selling biopharma tubing and contact lens materials into implantables, which now is a new space with new regulatory framework and new degree of complexity. Can we play in that? What does it mean for us? And how should we position that? And as we understand that trend, we go into the market and try to get verification. Is what we're hearing real, and is it something that we can actually find in one of our customers or multiple customers, so we can partner and drive a design thinking approach to develop a material and application? So this is the approach we're taking. It's at a specific level, but two things we're finding out through this process. Number one is that everything we do currently with respect to innovation in our industry, the specialty chemicals, is driven by the dimensions of regulation and sustainability. So if I look at all the new application developments and chemistries we've been driving in the last 3 years at least, all fall into these buckets. That's number one. The second thing we're finding out is the complexity of the ecosystem has gone from what it was 10 years ago, where you had an oligopoly of players, or at least specific accounts that were big and dominating market segments, to a plethora of partners, which are not only big companies, they're startups, there's more innovators, is regional differentiated, and it actually creates a mosaic of an ecosystem where we think we need to navigate, and that becomes very, very difficult. As an example, I mentioned it to you in the morning session that in the last 6 years, the number of non-disclosure agreements I've been working on has increased threefold, because the number of opportunities and partners which starts not only with material suppliers, but also testing equipment, analytical tools, and this is becoming more and more complex. So in the future, I think if I pivot in the next 10 years, the use of AI tools will help us actually decipher more of those external signals. It will become a baseline model using AI with all of these external signals to really get us down to a prioritization of 5 to 10 opportunities by segment that we're going to go after. So just to summarize that, today, we're going in the market, we're hearing the voice of our incumbent base, we're analyzing that through external content, but it's getting more complex. So in the future, we will need other tools and other mechanisms, and I think AI will play a significant role analyzing those external signals. There's no silver bullet solution here. There's no something that I can offer through a certain system that can solve this or make it easier, but I think handling that complexity will be a competitive advantage in the future.
Well, the only thing that's constant is change, as we're seeing, and that's not going to go and slow down in any way. And interestingly, you talk around the last 3 years, you know, regulations have come in strong on the one hand, ecosystems are playing on the other hand, you know, limitation or discipline and opportunity. You could look at it. And so you really, in this environment, you better become a learning organization, as Peter Senge would be framing it, right? And phrasing it. And so doing this kind of exercise to all of you in the audience, you know, look, I'm sure you look at those questions or those items and say, how would I score? Well, that's exactly the value of this, and do that on a relatively regular basis so that you see where your outages continue to be. And in the last call, by the way, this is an interactive session in case you weren't clear. I should have said at the start. If anybody's got any thoughts on what Thanos is saying, what Colin's saying, what I'm saying, then please throw it in the chat or even raise your hand, because we can continue the conversation to some degree. Yeah, I mean, this is so relevant and needs to be checked on a regular basis. Oh, the point I was going to make is that, you know, one thing you could do here is do it for you as a leader of the organization, but then also you could have your organization fill it out and see where's the alignment versus the discrepancy. You know, what you think you're doing versus how your organization feels. That's where another set of insights are going to pop, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's true.
So no questions at this point, I see in the chat at least, or thoughts. Then let's go on and move to the next section, Colin.
Great. So we'll talk about leadership, and again, an area which is very strong when it comes to how Momentive are performing. For those of you who aren't sure, leadership in the context of ISO means commitment to innovation, policy, and promoting an innovation culture. The section really outlines that leadership must define a clear innovation strategy, align with the organization's goals, promote the innovation management system across all levels, and integrate it into how people work every day. And leaders are also responsible for allocating resources and supporting ongoing evaluation to ensure that that system that we put in place is effective and continually improves. So my questions to you, Thanos, again, as an area where you're pretty strong, I'm very interested in how your leaders are actually interacting with the work of innovation every day. You know, some organizations, they have an innovation governance board, you know, where it's where their job is to intersect between leadership and the work of innovation to make sure we stay aligned to corporate goals. There are others really focus on the portfolio, or they devolve responsibility to divisions. And then for others, they embed innovation measures into the performance metrics of leadership. How does it happen at Momentive? How do you see this coming to life?
Yeah, thanks, Colin. If I can break it together at my level, the executive leadership level, what we do is really understand the segmentation and positioning of our organization with respect to those markets that we want to win. What are the spaces that we have strength based on our capabilities and future trajectory, and what do we want to focus on? And this happens at my level, focusing on deciding where we're going to play. We're going to play in the personal care market. We want to play in the electronic material market. We're going to play in the agricultural market. This is where we have strength. And what is the innovation platforms for those areas? That is actually driven at one level lower, where we have segment leaders that take ownership of really understanding how you can actually translate the strategy you have for the next 5 years into the innovation outcomes and objectives. And this happens looking at applying the jobs to be done framework, which is what we apply to understand needs, and translate that into a multi-generation product pipeline and technology pipeline for the individual segment. That's the strategic exercise that happens at the segment level. And that segment leader, alongside with the technology leader, are the ones that actually are the most important cohort that drives innovation with regards to specific action targets and outcomes. They're also responsible for aligning expectation on execution, driving the innovation process, and aligning resources, skill sets through strategic talent management to really meet those objectives and drive those outcomes in the next 5 years. A very important point here, which is a competitive advantage for us, at least it developed over the years, that my role is responsible for driving culture. So I'm responsible for setting the tone of the innovation culture with respect to standardized processes, our innovation process, the way that actually our reward and recognition program works, incentive compensation for innovation, our technical career path, our IP strategy and our IP leadership, our regulatory leadership, sustainability on the product level, all of the systems that glue those things, and all of the systems that actually create a common understanding and build a common language are at my level. So I'm responsible of looking at all these segments and pulling this together. And in addition to that, I'm also actually very keen in looking at how do you capitalize on synergies across all those. And those synergies can be technologies, chemistries that can be shared, can be applications that can be adjacent in one area that you can take to another, but most importantly are people that you can actually cross-fertilize across those segments. So I run this at the level of my staff. It's not down to the organization, it's really my level, and that has proven to be very effective because if you can influence one thing at my level, it's not really specific programs or chemistries or applications, that's too segregated. What you can really influence is the culture framework within the organization operates. And that happens with excellence in business processes and also standardization. Don't get me wrong, that standardization is not rigid. So we're trying not to create rigid processes. We're more creating a rigorous framework that people can operate with. But it's important that we have some level of standard and some level of adhesion on process excellence. And that has proven to be a competitive advantage for us, having multiple segments and multiple areas to focus. So yeah, I hope that gives you an overview of. Yeah.
I'm just thrilled that that culture is on here, which would be an omission if it wasn't. I'm wondering if culture doesn't deserve a whole page in its own right with the multiple components of culture, because it's such a relevant hot topic. And I'm also so thrilled, Thanos, that you are owning that personally and individually. Many leaders, they are a bit reluctant to get into culture. They don't even know what culture is. It's not the beanie bags, it's not the table tennis tables. It is a system of values, beliefs, and behaviors. And so how do you get to really, at the human level, get in touch with that? And as as you are well aware, the more technical an organization gets, the less soft skill capable the organization tends to be. And that is an enormous opportunity / limiter in organizations. And of course, this is why the Carol Dweck, the mind, heart, gut, Carol Dweck, growth mindset versus fixed mindset. Brené Brown talks about, authenticity and vulnerability. And then, of course, Amy Edmondson being the number one, thinker of the Thinkers 50 for now 2 years in a row. On psychological safety. And so getting that all together is such an enormous priority for leaders on top of the almost like the regular technical job, right? And so this is an enormous priority, and glad to hear you talk in this extensive way around culture.
Yeah, it evolved in this manner, John. It was not always like that. And I think if you go back like 10, 15 years in the old GE legacy where we come from, it was purely technical. So the decision to put someone in my role was driven mainly at the number of application development patents or technical expertise a person had. But that is not the world we live in. And what I actually argue a lot is that the role of a leader at my level should be to drive culture and create an environment where people want to join, stay, and excel. Because let's face it, with the rise of AI, I'm not really sure that knowledge in chemistry and engineering will be a differentiator in the next 10 years. Probably will not. Let's wait and see. But definitely the cultural element, the empathy, the equity, the alignment of a human capital, and the process excellence that drives a cultural norm that people appreciate and adopt is going to be an advantage either way. So
I think you raise really good points, and it's a conversation I've had with some of the folks that have helped write the standard, which is where is innovation culture, and does it have a role to be in a standard? And I think where I'm coming to, this is my personal opinion, is that organizations should be in a position where they foster an innovation climate, an environment within which the culture can develop, and they need to get a better understanding of how to build culture, which often is behavioral change, getting people to do something different than they were doing before. And I think answers going to be very different for every organization. Starting points are very different, and even within organizations, you'll find the culture in R&D is quite different to sales and marketing and manufacturing, and they sometimes need to be addressed differently and understand what kind of climate can we foster in order to build a culture within those areas. But I think it's a great topic, and it's something that, there's threads of climate elements in the standard, but it doesn't go as deep as you indicate, John. I think it's a really good point.
Well, it's all a journey, right?
Indeed, it is.
We're
Absolutely.
we're living the learning as we expressed ourselves before. So
yeah,
all
I'm going
right,
to skip
we
over
can
the
talk.
planning section, I think, just because we've covered quite a bit of this already, and we'll dig into the area of support. So for those of you who aren't aware, when we say support in ISO language, we're talking about assigning budgets, personnel, structure, other resources to the innovation program. It's making sure we've got adequate resources and personnel and competence to support what we're trying to build here. But it also emphasizes the importance of effective communication and proper management and documented innovation to support the innovation management system. And I think if I was to pick out one area that perhaps is a little weaker for you, Thanos, it's in the space of communications. And this isn't uncommon. We see this a lot in organizations where they've got a lot of the building blocks, but communications isn't really dealt with as a separate activity. It's either wrapped into corporate comms, or it's not addressed at all. I just think it's an underinvested area, I suppose. Perhaps you can share a little bit about maybe where you see the opportunities are to improve around comms at Momentive, and maybe highlight any things that you think you do well too.
Yeah, I think this is something that was evident to me when I went through this assessment. It's really something that we know very well. If you look where we came from a heritage of very technical, deep expertise, understanding materials and processes and chemical technologies. So the people that actually staff this organization for decades were not really the communicators that you expect that go out there and tell the story of what we're doing well and also where we're failing, which is also a very important story. And you can see this from a data perspective. If you ask your audience who's Momentive, I don't think people have heard of the company. But if you go back and say we are GE Silicons, this is what I use when I go into conferences and meet people, then the light bulb goes on and people say, oh, you're GE Silicons. Now you understand what you're doing. So that actually kind of highlights how weak our branding is. And this has material impact. I don't want to really downplay this, Colin. This has material impact. It impacts recruiting and it impacts your positioning in the marketplace. So we definitely need to do better. And the way we're trying to improve that is by telling stories, by telling our story from a positioning of what we've done with our innovation department, but also telling a story from some of our successes we had with some product lines out there, with some successes we had with our organization, with some innovation outcomes that led to major product lines in the marketplace. The other thing that actually I'm doing personally, I'm going out there inside the organization mostly, and I'm highlighting our failures. So it's interesting to see when you go in front of an audience where it's the marketing organization or manufacturing and others and tell them how much money did we burn, quote unquote, to learn over the period of my tenure at Momentive, which led into significant product developments over the period of years. This is actually an important element, which really takes us back to the fact that innovation is all about experimentation, learning, failure, the cultural elements of it, which actually over years leads to a compounding outcome of success through new processes. So what we're trying to do now is really practically staff a communications organization that can help us really tell those stories even more profoundly, both outside to our market players, partners, ecosystem, but also to ourselves internally. And you guys highlighted a little bit of what we see in our organization is that certain groups at Momentive, our organization, technology department, marketing, and sales do understand and embrace what we're doing. But if you go into our supply chain organization or potentially a manufacturing organization, you see other things. And the culture might not align fully to what we're actually discussing. And a little bit has to do with those norms, those stories, and those successes and those failures and how those actually have been communicated. But yeah, we do have an important element here, and I think this is something that we've uncovered. We have an opportunity for improvement. Yeah.
That's good. One of the benefits of doing indeed this exercise, right? Looking at where your opportunity lies, and indeed, I would not underestimate communication. As I always say, right? It's much better to over communicate than to under communicate. And you made a few interesting points around, bringing the technical elements together with the commercial elements, and how difficult that still is for a company, right? We all hear the story around marketing and R&D. They don't never talk to each other. And so, where do you have those kind of folks within your R&D within your technical organization that have this kind of savvy to be able to go and really connect with the marketing and the consumer on the one hand, to explain what the product does, but also listen to them on the other hand, what's needed in the marketplace, and being that conduit between the two. Establishing that kind of communication, I still see within companies, it's enormous opportunity.
Well, that lends us perfectly into the next section here, which is the operation piece. And again, in innovation language, this is about moving innovation through a clearly defined or governed process. It's really about systematically planning, controlling, documenting your innovation processes, and ensuring the initiatives align with the strategic goals and are supported by the right resources and the right responsibilities at the right time. It also includes identifying innovation opportunities and creating and validating concepts, as well as developing and deploying solutions while monitoring outcomes for success. Standard innovation DNA, really, for most of us. And again, you'll see here the Momentive's answers are very strong. I either agree or strongly agree to all of the answers here. So the topic I'd like to dig into is an area that kind of comes up quite often, but more frequently, most recently, is validation of concepts. Now, innovation, it takes time, and the world moves pretty fast. So we have to be careful, of course, as we're developing things, that the world doesn't go off in another direction. And I think in the past, we could get away with maybe not validating too much, but increasingly now, because of the pace of change, especially technological change, and as more disrupted economic environments as well, we have to continually validate those things, either internally but also externally with potential buyers. And I wonder, Thanos, you are performing pretty well here. You could talk us a little bit through building what John just mentioned. How do Momentive validate the concepts that you're working on to make sure that you continually align to where the buying is going to be?
Yeah, Colin, just for the record, it has taken us over, I would say, 8 to 10 years to get to this level. And we did an analysis back in 2019, why our new product development failed. And 75% of that, give or take, was because of desirability at the customer, meaning we did not understand what the customer really wanted, or if I broaden a little bit, what the market really needed. So the other 30% was internal, was about alignment, as you mentioned, functional alignment, as well as capabilities to drive scale and to be agile and fast in specific areas that we didn't have competence in terms of process technologies and scale. But that 75% was repeated also in 2020. Just on the COVID year, we did exactly the same analysis and found the same result. This is something that has driven us towards understanding of how can we do better on the desirability front. And what does that mean specifically for us? Several things. When we dig deep into opportunities, as I mentioned, we get all these signals. We have to verify those signals in a way that both from the marketplace, but also internally. And those signals actually manifest themselves into developing a chemistry and application. So over the years, we've invested heavily in really application development capabilities and chemistry capabilities and right skill set. So when we get those signals, we can create prototypes that we can test internally with the same level of test method and accuracy and understanding with our customers. So when we talk to them, we speak the same language. Speaking the same language with the broader vertical market is very, very important. That gets you across the initial hurdle of you providing them with the material and going towards to the methodology of providing them with a solution. And this is where the magic happens. This is where really design thinking occurs, when the marketplace and the vertical market really understands that you can help them with a solution. Because let's face it, most of our customers, they have an idea, but they don't really know what they want in that place. So they need to really collaborate with us to get to that level. So working and getting those signals, but also investing internally on the right capability, which was a bet practically, to really replicate application development and testing development in our customers, so we can have the same type of discussion. The other thing that we need is that we worked a lot on aligning expectation internally. We have a broader ecosystem, which is internal, where we have capabilities and resources around the world. And we've actually narrowed our organization to focus on programs instead of reporting lines and locations. So we drive accountability and skill set from all around the world, depending what the need is, so we can really be agile and provide those solutions in a timely manner. Another thing that actually I can share with your audience here, which is very important, and I think for us, it's proven to be another competitive advantage. Since 2021, when we started this journey of taking really deep dives on these elements, we've established a post-mortem analytics on our new product development. So when we launch a product, it passes 12 months, and after 24 months that's in the market, we pull everybody back and we do like a post-mortem. What has worked well? What hasn't worked well? What can we do better? And that has led to a lot of insight with respect to how the customer operates, how the customer is using our product, how it's their adoption line, how they're working with their customers. That has created a lot of insights that came back and fueled our innovation outcomes and our strategic positioning. So these are a few things that we've done. I think I indeed believe that we currently have a very good process here, which again, it's very, it's not rigid. It's very adaptable and agile depending on the different segments we have. It will never be perfect, but it actually provides us an opportunity to really be agile, but also be thorough as we go and do a risk assessment on all these programs going forward.
This was a motivational speech, Thanos. Well done. I must, no, seriously, the one thing that I'm observing as I talk to so many industries and companies now is, you know, when you're a large company, you need structured systems and operations, right? Or standardized operations. And the problem with those is that they take over. They have a tendency to take over. And so everybody becomes check markers and nobody asks any questions anymore and nobody experiments. And so actually somebody, remember Thanos, in our recent Innovation Leadership Council, one of our council friends brought up the point around the German automotive industry. Why is it suffering so much today? And he submitted, which I had a lot of sympathy with, which is, you know, it is run by mechanical engineers who manage mechanical engineers who manage mechanical engineers. And that's not where the future of the car industry lies, some would argue. And as some companies in China have seen, where it's really becoming more and more of a software game that's become a mechanical engineering game. So operation structures and even, you know, your resource pool, are you tapping into the future, or are you a relic of the past? And challenging that all the time. And again, using this tool here to go and gauge yourself on where you are, ask the right questions. And you know, it's very urgent in my view, because we're seeing a lot of change happening around us, and I'm seeing that across many different industries.
I've seen the same with processes, and again, it has to do a little bit with the level of the organization and the volume of the organization. I think very large companies will suffer more. I think if you are in the $2 to $4 billion range, you could actually accomplish what we're doing, being rigorous but not rigid. There's a tipping point to that, John, at least in my experience and observation from our industry.
Yeah.
But even those larger companies, they need to find a way to go and drive that agility or even that future fitness in their way of operating. So, like, Colin, you wanted to make a point?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to agree wholeheartedly. I mean, you see, if you look at the data, that organizational life cycles are getting shorter and shorter. And, you know, you build a super tanker, and then when, you know, something changes, it's very difficult to then pivot and adjust. And I think that it's going to be very challenging for large organizations to ensure they stay relevant because the pace of change is overwhelming. And I think we should see, this isn't something we've really digging into today, but that push towards agility is fostering more engagements with other third parties. You take wrapping someone else's capability. You mentioned it earlier on, Thanos, so that more NDAs than you've ever dealt with in the past. And I'm seeing this across all kinds of different sectors. It's a fascinating area, this growth of more of a network-based innovation model as opposed to having to do everything ourselves.
So
yeah,
on this, I was just considering bringing it to the audience before you, because you have one more topic, one more theme you wanted to cover, right? But I was wondering if we still had an audience, because nobody made any comment.
Yeah, we have a question just popped up, actually. Yeah.
But we have a comment, and so let's go and listen to our customers. Remember how important customers are. So here we go. Thank you, Thilo, for bringing this point to us. Along these lines, how is collaboration management reflected in the framework, e.g., overcoming internal hurdles and speed of decision making, IP, people, and culture? I guess there's a question to you, Colin.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly in there to a certain extent, but it doesn't give you the answers or more the point that these things are important. I mean, when you sort of extract out of the standard, the key building blocks, one of the most important things is employee engagement, and underpinning that is collaboration management. We need to find a way of ensuring that all employees in every corner of the organization can play their role to be innovative and to build up that innovation culture. And a key one of the things I would observe is when I'm working with clients, I see two innovation behaviors always writ large. One is sharing, preparedness to get involved and share, and the second one is collaboration, helping each other. And actually, these two behaviors are crucial to fostering that climate. And so it's embedded in the employee engagement area, but it doesn't go down to the level of detail saying you have to have this. More that this sort of employee engagement piece needs to be covered. When it comes to overcoming internal hurdles, speed of decision making, IP, people, and culture, these are big topics, and probably we could do 3 hours of webinars just on those alone. But just very briefly, the overcoming of internal hurdles and decision making, this is really baked into the root and branch of the standard. The idea is to put a system in place which really connects leadership to the work of innovation and systematize that approach to doing those things. So we bring those two worlds very much closer together. But I'm very happy to follow up on that with that individual in more detail, because it's a big topic and probably something a little bit too big for today.
Perhaps from my end, just on the collaboration topic, in the past we've experimented with a lot of collaboration models. We have a system that actually aligns resource to project. We don't respect reporting lines, and when we utilized that in the beginning, we failed. And one of the reasons we failed was because you create a team of different skill set, and diversity plays a tremendous role. You have somebody who's an IP specialist, a person that does regulatory, you have a process chemist, you have application engineers, and you have a bunch of chemists that doing synthesis, and all these people drive a certain goal towards a new product. The guy who scores, which is practically the ADs and the product developers, are the ones that actually are visible out there. And we failed because we failed to recognize the importance of rewarding and recognizing all other components. So in recent years, we started and we have a deliberate recognition session for all these other people who are in the background and drive a lot of that collaboration mindset we need. And that has worked very, very well for us. So I think your collaboration framework, irrespective how that will work in your company, has to align with your reward and recognition on a specific level, recognizing the competency and expertise of people that bring on the table to a desired outcome. And I think that's, at least for us, that has been very important.
I think you raised a really good point. We are very good at recognizing the person that owns the last step in the path to bringing somebody. They delivered the thing. But what about all the people that helped get it there? If we want to see more collaboration, we have to bake collaboration as a measure into our rewards and recognition programs. And actually, I'm seeing some organizations starting to do this, where they will, for any innovation activity, recognize the people that shared and owned the new things, but also that helped out. And that might be someone who actually had a critical eye and said, I'm not sure about this thing. You might need to fix that before we put it forward. So it's a fascinating area that I could talk all day about. But we don't have all day, so let's move on to the last part of the session. So the last topic I'd like to get to is in performance evaluation, and this is kind of a topic that's close to my heart because it comes up so often, even in the most, I would say, high levels of innovation maturity, organizations that you would know and respect. The common challenge they have is innovation measures and KPIs. How on earth do we measure it in a way which is understandable to leadership, which is meaningful for portfolio decision making, but also makes sense for corporate innovators? Maybe you can share a little bit, Thanos, in terms of how you're dealing with that aspect and where you maybe have some areas to improve.
Yeah, this is another topic that requires a long discussion. I think you can devote a session to it. And there's no silver bullet here, right? There's no solution that I can offer to anyone that actually you can apply today. That you need to fit it to your company's needs. But at a high level, we need to look at this from an iceberg model. So when I go in front of the board, that tip of the iceberg has to be value creation through R&D, through innovation. It has to be. Whether you have an ROI, whether you have sales, whether you have something tangible, it has to be something tangible. Now, the art of this, and it is an art, is how do you translate those lagging indicators that you present, which reflect your lagging value creation, into leading indicators that go multi-levers down and touch the ultimate lower level, which is people, it's behaviors, inclusion, it's equity, creating an organization that actually fosters innovation. And what are the layers of that? So for us, when we start, we look at with sales and ROI of R&D, and we go down into levels of execution, alignment to strategy. We talked about desirability. We have desirability metrics aligned to that. We have metrics on how well we're executing our innovation pipeline, how we're adhering to our goals and objectives. We have metrics on generation of knowledge, which is also a leading indicator. And then we go down to the lowest level, as I mentioned, which I'm focusing a lot, which is the level of people. How we're looking at our technical career plan, development improvement needs for our employees, looking at our leadership development, looking at equity and inclusion. How do we define inclusion? How do we drive diversity in the organization? What does that mean? What metrics do we track for that? And those are the ones that I believe that we should focus on, because if I don't do anything up here and do everything well down here, I have a chance to hitting my utmost goal, because it's all about creating an organization that fosters progress and innovation. And if you align goals, equity, belonging, inclusion, alignment to strategy, then things tend to flow by themselves. You don't need to chaperone it much. But if you focus on driving sales, you're not going to touch the actual leading indicator down here, which is people. So this is how we've structured it at Momentive, and I'm happy to share this with anyone who has interest. And I believe this is the way that we should focus on going forward, because as I mentioned, analytics up here will not help us find the right elements down here. And with more AI, with more digital transformation, we need to focus more on the people aspect.
It brings us back to culture as well, right?
Yeah.
And I always say in my course, innovation is a multifunctional human team sport. And so that's where we got to focus on. We got to focus really on, well, one of the things, obviously leaders operate at three levels, right? The envisioning level, the enabling to execute level. You know, strategy is only as good as the consumer sees the execution. But then also there is the enabling and empowering, enabling individuals, getting them on fire, and empowering teams. And there's a lot of research in that field as well, more and more. So this is back to the culture component. You can even, I mean, Amy Edmondson, for instance, one example, she wrote this article in HBR already, 2 decades ago. Is yours a learning organization? And you can, it's like 15 metrics that you can easily fill out. And so they could actually be squeezed into version 2 of this framework as well. Anyway, I don't want to belabor that too much, but there's a lot. I mean, it's the soft skills you can actually also take as you can measure those if you want, if you set your mind to it. And if anybody's more, if anybody's interested, you can reach out to one of us for sure.
Maybe a quick point on that, John. I think that learning organization point is fascinating. And I think that the purpose of the standard, and we haven't really got into the iteration point, is it's something that should evolve over time. And built into it is that we review and reflect, and we adjust and pivot our approach according to what we see. So, and I think that's one of the big benefits of potentially adopting this kind of structure, is to say, baked into the conversations we have with leadership, is that innovation isn't static. It's just not just the R&D department over there. It's going to continually evolve, because we do need to continually learn. Great point.
Okay, we got 5 minutes left. Let's see if there's any other question, folks. You've been a very quiet audience. So I kept an eye on the chat because I wanted to be sensitive, but I haven't really seen any comments other than Thanos, and now I see Larry also saying that. Thank you, Larry, for acknowledging that this was indeed a worthwhile exercise for us to do, bringing it to life. It's appreciated. Any other comments, folks? Raise your hand, speak up. We have 5 minutes left, of which we can easily use 3 minutes to answer your needs/queries. Nobody. Crystal clear, huh? All right. Let me then turn it over to maybe Colin first, and then Thanos second on last comment, last observation.
Yeah, well, firstly, thank you for the discussion and the questions. Really enjoyable conversation here. So I think Thanos has been very gracious, sharing his experiences and how Momentive is progressing. And it was great to have such a mature organization to illustrate some of the practices through examples. ISO is a very broad church. If you're not aware of the standard, it's worth taking a look. If you want a quick feeling of how you're doing, then the link there is to take a go at going through the innovation management assessment. You will get a report, and you will get a view from myself or one of my colleagues in terms of some general observations. But do bear in mind that there are limits to what any standard can indicate. So your culture, your structure, your objectives, and your urgency around innovation, these are all things that the standard cannot offer you. And they are, you know, if you're trying to improve innovation performance, there will be some work to be done. And hopefully through us or through your own innovation networks, you'll get that support.
Thank you, Colin. And Thanos, your last comment, and maybe you can include an answer to the question that just comes in. How do you manage innovation with your raw material suppliers?
Well, that's an interesting one. This is indeed a space that we're
in 2 minutes.
Yeah, take a deep dive. We've established very tight partnerships with selective raw material suppliers. We don't go in the spot market. We have specific connections to raw material suppliers. What we're struggling currently right now is finding raw material suppliers in the natural and biodegradable space. And this is one area that's actually part of our scouting effort. But with regards to existing raw material suppliers, most of them we have joint development agreements. At least we have 6 or 7 of them with key spaces where we try to really redesign some of the raw materials. We buy a lot of polyethers, polyol polyethers. We buy a lot of specialty additives and solvents. And we do have tight relationships. So it's more on a long-standing relationship that actually leads us to having a more flexibility to innovate together, but also kind of command, if you like, price. That's our strategy. We're struggling though on the green part because there are not so many, and they're very, very segregated around the world. This is an interesting question, and obviously not an easy one. Yeah, on regards to this activity, again, thank you so much, Colin and John, for including me in here. I think overall, as you evolve with the standard, the value of this that I see is really, as I mentioned, to compare and contrast organizations and use it at my level to take a direction or a compass where your innovation management system is going and where do you need to improve. But as this evolves, I get the sense that with more data, this will be more refined. Elements of culture will come in, additional elements of metrics might come in. So I think the challenge will be to continue to drive the standard in a way that doesn't become very bureaucratic, because that's the area where we need to maintain some level of scrutiny in all our organization. We should not actually use the standards just to make things clunky. We should use the standards just to derive value, and I think that's what I would be looking to see going forward.
Yeah, I see, and as I wrap this up, I see the benefit of this really stepping back from the being busy kind of notion, that we are also busy to do the things which we think worked in the last 25 years. The world around us is really changing. People sometimes say we're living in unprecedented times, and there's this old, generation going, yeah, but we always said that. I lived through look at my white hair. I'm probably one of the longest living through this. It is really different than what I had in my years at Procter & Gamble, 10 to 30 years ago. And so, change only going to increase. The forces around us are moving so quickly. It is really a VUCA on steroids world. And within that world, you need to constantly look at how you innovate to innovate. And so this is giving you a handle on this. It's not perfect, doesn't need to be perfect, because it's all about learning and getting better as you move forward. There's no perfection here. And so I found this to be very insightful myself. Thank you so much, Hype Innovation. Thank you, Colin, for bringing this to me and allowing me to learn. And of course, Thanos, for your excellent perspectives and partnership. It's been a great pleasure. Thank you, audience, for taking the time. Hope you found this helpful, and we'll see you into the future. And of course, any more questions, bring them over to Colin, and even I see some requests specifically to Thanos. Thank you all very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Great rest of your day, evening.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye now.
Thanks. Thank you. Bye-bye.